dragons. They are one of the most popular fantasy creatures, and in the game Dungeons & Dragons, they are the titular monster. But when it comes to their stat blocks, they're kind of lame. This was my thesis for my previous video where I made the Wither Dragon, a variant of the Black Dragon. People seem to like the video, and a few of you asked me to continue working my way through the dragons, so I'm here to take another shot at it. But before we get into the new variant, let's go over my claim about the dragon stat blocks real quick and respond to some of the feedback from the last video so you understand a little bit more why I'm doing this. Basically, my biggest issue with the dragon stat blocks is that they are all almost identical. The attack pattern, legendary actions, and abilities. If you take the black dragon stat block, change the element from acid to fire, and just say it's a red dragon when you run it, your party probably would never know. Which is fine on some level. As a DM, I do this with mob stat blocks all the time. If you need a no-name leader goblin, but nothing's working for you, you grab the veteran stat block and just say it's a goblin. But the issue is we're not dealing with a no-name leader goblin. We're talking about dragons. Giant flying leviathans that spit elements, have pages of lore, distinct personalities and goals based on their type of variation, and oh yeah, their name is on the cover of every book! Like, I have a little trouble understanding how this happened. Not a single core dragon has an ability in their stat block that makes you go, oh yeah, that feels like a red dragon, or it makes sense that a green dragon with all their scheming would be able to do that. Nothing! In fact, they doubled down on this recently. In Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, they revealed a form of dragon beyond ancient, the Great Worm. Now, I have run the stat block, and it was a lot of fun. But did you know that the black, white, green, blue, and red stat blocks are all the same stat block? And not like, oh, they're all the same. No, I mean they are literally all a single stat block. It just says that if it's this color, they're immune to this type of damage, and when they do elemental damage, it's this type for this color. Again, I had fun running the stat block, but like, there's really no flavor here. It's like if you had a meal that was prepared really well, but they only used salt in the kitchen. Like, yeah, you can do this, and it can still be pretty tasty, but there's no spice here. Now, in my last video, a very common response was, well, if you read the lore, you can see that they're very different, and you should just vary their tactics. Which, yes, you should vary their tactics, but hear me out on why this isn't the cure-all argument you think it is. Let's say that you had two players that both wanted to play a martial melee character. Player A has a backstory of how, after their home was raided and their family was destroyed by a horde of undead, they swore an oath to a god that they would track down and avenge their family to end the evil. Player B, on the other hand, has a backstory of being part of a wandering tribe, and they were raised to enter a rabid state that enhances their body and allows them to ignore pain and push their body farther than a normal mortal. Do you have an idea of the types of characters that they're going to bring to the table? Did you guess that they're both playing a champion fighter? No? Why not? Oh, is it because I forgot to mention that in this hypothetical game, that was the only option they had? Now, they get to vary their stats a little bit, and they'll get different equipment and loot, and of course they can vary their tactics in battle. But this doesn't change the fact that they're both playing characters with the exact same salt-seasoned abilities. And this is exactly what's happening with the dragon stat blocks. And the other argument I saw was, well, it's your job as a DM to punch up the stat blocks. And this one actually upset me a little bit. Not because I don't do this. I'm sitting on a mountain of homebrew that I've written over the years, and I'm putting it out for free on a YouTube channel. Clearly, this is kind of my thing. But it's the idea that it's the DM's job to do things like this. Like, they bought the monster manual and paid for stat blocks that professionals were paid actual money to write, and yet you still expect your DM to need to punch up and adjust these stat blocks on top of running the game for you to have fun sitting around a table as they spend extra time prepping and writing your game? You have the gall to say, yeah, that's your job. Like, don't get me wrong, I love doing this stuff, but that's not everyone's cup of tea, nor does every DM have the time to do these things. These stat blocks exist to make running the game easy, and the implication that you should have to punch these up on your own time is a little rage-inducing for me. And Wizards of the Coast acknowledges this to some point, because they released the new version of the Green Dragon stat block, and guess what? It looks way better than what the 2014 version was. Now, we'll get back to that stat block later, but I just need to Now, with the explanation of why I'm unhappy with the current stat blocks out of the way, I'm going to get to what you came here for, a new dragon. I looked over the other chromatics and decided that in this winter season, it felt right to take the white chromatic and give it a rework. Now, this decision had some complications to it. The biggest issue for me was the white dragon's whole concept. It's pretty laughably low. They're supposed to be these lone feral hunters, but when I look at them, I see the runt of the litter that got picked on by all of its older siblings. Now, I know that this is my personal interpretation and that may not be yours, but this is my show, so I'm going to do it that way. And the other thing is, when I mulled over that idea a bit, I decided I actually liked it and wanted to roll with it, but in a way that would still make the dragon an imposing threat. I then thought a lot about their element and the habitat they live in, trying to nail down the themes and personality that I wanted to commit to. Snow is so often viewed as beautiful, especially around the holidays where snowscapes make wonderful vistas to view and admire. But in reality, these habitats are cold, unfeeling, and can lead to disaster with a moment of distraction. While it may not be the most common fear, frigophobia or cryophobia is more than rational and a valid fear. But with that, I had what I wanted to be the base of this new dragon: cold and afraid. A dragon built on fear. Fear of everything. Mortals, more powerful dragons, monsters, anything strong enough to be a threat to it. A creature with such strong fear that it would pass that feeling along to its victims and force them to live with a constant state of hyper-anxiety that consumes its every waking second. With that, allow me to introduce you to the Frostfear Dragon. Hey, this is Editing Noches. I just wanted to say real quick that the story that follows this is kind of heavy and has neglectful/abusive family members in it. So if that's not your cup of tea, totally fine. I would just skip to this timestamp. But with that, yeah. Okay, good luck. I just wanted to warn you. Okay, bye. There are many different tales of how dragons came to be, but this origin story is a unique one. The story goes that many millennia ago, there was a clutch of freshly hatched metallic dragons. The mother was proud of herself for producing such a strong set of hatchlings. She dreamed of how powerful they would become, leading other dragons and the defeated chromatics that they would most certainly lord over. Well, all except the runt that hatched last. That one looked sickly and was an overall blemish on her perfect clutch. She looked on the wormling with disdain as she nurtured her hatchlings, and the small dragon siblings picked up on this quickly. In infancy, the instinct to dominate others as a dragon quickly turned into bullying the smallest and weakest of them. The mother noticed this, but did nothing. It would build character, she told herself, as the small dragon got the remaining scraps of food that were left night after night. Soon, the mother had to leave to find more food, since all that she had prepared was now gone. In her absence, the wormlings began to torment their sibling again, until the hatchling was accidentally pushed out from the nest. Unsure of what to do and scared of the bigger dragons that now looked down on them from the nest, the small dragon did the only thing it could think of. They ran. Ran away from their siblings, their nest, their uncaring mother, out into the harsh elements and a raging blizzard. The wormling wandered only for a small time, but in a snowstorm, it's easy to lose your way. Cold, alone, and filled only with fear, the wormling eventually collapsed to die. But in its darkest moment, another mother stepped in to save the poor dragon. This mother had been watching the situation unfold as a point of curiosity and saw potential in the poor creature. So as the creature shivered, surrendering to the elements, the Queen of Dragons intervened from far beyond the plain. The falling snow began to fuse with the small scales, and the constant fear in its mind consumed everything as the wormling was reborn into the first Frostfear Dragon. Now, while Frostfear Dragons may be regarded as the weakest among all chromatics, only the truly foolish underestimate them. Fighting a Frostfear is said to be like fighting a blizzard itself, and while losing a fight to a dragon is a grisly end, being defeated by a Frostfear can be a fate worse than death. You see, when a Frostfear defeats a particularly powerful opponent, paranoia will drive them to ensure that their prey can never threaten them again. To ensure this, the dragon will preserve them in ice, keeping them alive in a form of cryogenesis for as long as the Frostfear lives. However, these victims are not permitted a peaceful cryogenic sleep. While in this state, the fears and constant anxieties of the Frostfear are shared with the victim, driving them mad to the point that, when released, they will serve and follow orders of their new dragon lord. These captives are the glittering gems of a Frostfear's horde, and while they may not be the strongest mentally, a Frostfear will remember every strike and blow from the fights with these prizes. Frostfears don't wish to interact with many others and prefer to stay as solitary creatures, but this desire will push them to spread faster than any other dragon, quickly moving to find places that are away from other powerful creatures, including other Frostfears. These dragons are one of the most common threats to towns and cities, as a nearby Frostfear will rapidly change the climates in less than a year. As the temperature drops, crops will become unsustainable. Livestock will freeze solid, and the elements will become the death of anyone unable to adapt quickly, or more likely leave to find a new home. Many heroes and adventurers have fallen to these white-scaled horrors, their bodies freezing up as they are unable to find the will to keep fighting. Even the bravest warriors and cleverest of mages have been defeated and struck down by these beings of pure fear. Many hear of a scared dragon that is the weakest of all, stepping forward with pride, only to be consumed. But a dragon hunter once said it best: relax once when dealing with a Frostfear, and your confidence will collapse in on itself to suffocate you in an instant. And that is the flavor of the Frostfear Dragon. I personally really like them, and I think there's a lot that can be done with them if you put them in your world. Since they're scared of anything strong and they want to stay away from other threats, they're a common draconic danger to the edges of civilizations. After a Frostfear is spotted, job posting and requests will go out quickly as people hope for immediate help so they don't have to leave everything they've known. If the party accepts a job like this and makes too much of an impression, they may be seen as too much of a threat, and the dragon may just decide to pack up and leave to go somewhere else. But if it settles near a different town, the party will have to learn from its previous attempt, needing to plan to surprise or trap the dragon. Or if the players wanted to take a pacifist route, they could try and find a place for the dragon to settle away from civilization. Or maybe a powerful but overconfident mage went into a Frostfear's lands and hasn't been heard from in weeks. Their apprentices state that if the mage had died, they would have been revived via clone jars, but none of them have been activated. As a result, they believe that their master is trapped in a cryogenic sleep by the Frostfear and are requesting the party to go on a rescue mission. They're promised loot and a favor from the mage on success, but what will happen if the mage has succumbed to the fear of the dragon, and now the party needs to fight the person that they're trying to save? But I know that you guys can come up with fantastic plot points. I know why you're still here. It's all about those stats. You gotta have them, right? Well, let's give you a taste of the Frostfear's abilities. First off, these boys are tanky with a lot of hit points. This is something that seemed to be implied by the original stat blocks, and it made sense that these guys are probably used to taking a little bit of a beating. Also, with white scales in a snow environment, it can be hard to spot them, so they do have a snow camouflage feature. They are also incredibly jumpy creatures, ready to jump into a fight, retreat, or find out what broke that twig. So they can dash or make a perception check as a bonus action. Icicles grow all along their tail, which they can use to fling at creatures that are at range, or use it to slow the creatures hit by the tail attack as icicles attach their prey to the ground. The Frightful Presence feature also got a little update that will be specific for the Frostfear. While it does work as normal, it now has a combat reapplication. If a creature passes a saving throw, it becomes immune to the ability for 24 hours. But if the creature is reduced below half their maximum hit points, they are no longer immune as the fear from the dragon begins to creep back into them. Similar to the Wither Dragon, the Breath Attack now has an extra effect attached to it. It reduces movement speed for 1 minute on a failed saving throw. The amount scales from the Wormling to the Ancient form, but I do want to touch on this a little. I personally really love these extra effects, but they can be pretty devastating, which I do think is good because there are, dragons. But I also want to point out that I would encourage you to let your players think outside the box on how to end these minute-long effects early, both for this one, the Wither Dragons, and any in the future. Writing options to end them early into the rules is technically an option, but the implication could be weird, too wordy, and it makes it seem like there's an intended solution. This is just my opinion though. You really don't have to do this, but I just want to say I would totally be fine with my party fireballing themselves to get everyone warmed back up and back to full movement speed. Now we're on to legendary actions. The detect and tail attack are still solid and still here, but these dragons have ice in their veins and can make your body freeze up with a glance, forcing a wisdom saving throw or taking cold damage and becoming frightened for a short time. They also can summon a blizzard around them as they fly to incapacitate their nearby enemies for a short time. Lastly, the ancient dragon gets a unique legendary action that allows them to pull all the heat from a creature's body, heavily reducing its action economy and ability options. And the last bit that isn't technically actually part of the stat block, the Lair actions. They can encase a creature at 0 hit points in ice, starting to inflict them with fear-based madness, release another creature that has been encased in that same ice, summon a blizzard around the dragon so that if you're too far away, you're unable to fight, forcing you to stay close, reinforce itself with ice to give it temporary hit points, and freeze the ground over, causing it to become a slippery mess. There are other small changes and additions, but for that you'll have to download the Frostfear Dragon stat blocks to look them over for yourself. Fortunately, you can download the Wormling, Young, Adult, and Ancient versions of the Frostfear Dragon for free on my Ko-Fi and Patreon. Everything I make here is based off a pay-what-you-want system, so if you want to throw a couple bucks my way, great. If you can't or don't want to, that's totally fine too. Just consider hitting the like button here if you like the video, and maybe subscribing so you can see the other dragon variants coming out soon. My goal is to get the red and blue variants out before the new monster manual releases, and then after that I'm going to be working on the green one, since I still want to do it, but I want to do my own thing before I really look over the new stat blocks. With that, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.